Thank you. Staff, do you have any non-agenda items? I know there's a couple city councilors that I think have non-agenda items, but any staff?
Mr. Mayor, staff do not have any non-agenda items.
All right, Councillor Lube, I believe you have one, correct?
Correct.
Do you want to state what it is, and we'll then handle it at near the end of the meeting?
Sure. I'd like to discuss the city and the mayor writing a letter to our state representatives to support extending the eviction moratorium for the session that the governor has called. I think it's important for them to hear that from us as a city.
All right, thank you. Council President Goodhouse, you had one or more than one?
Yes, I have two. The first one is regarding the Planet Fitness email that was sent in earlier to council email. I've been talking with them and other fitness industry and like to discuss that a little bit more for non-agenda item as far as the fitness industry being closed and based on the data that's being provided, if that should be or not, and whether or not what we want to do with it. And additionally, with the Tiger Cares program, want to discuss what looks like there might be as far as applicants, if anyone had started a business from December 19 on, looks like part of the application process required that. And if someone started after that point, looks like they may not have filled out the application or proceeded on forward. So I want to talk about that to make sure that we may not be missing out on providing grants to businesses that may have started from December 19 on.
Okay. Thank you. We will cover all three of those topics near the end of the meeting. All right, we'll move on to item number 2 on our agenda, which is the consent agenda, which is used for routine items including minutes, proclamations, and approval of contracts or intergovernmental agreements. Information on this item is available on the city's website in the packet for this meeting. Consent items may be enacted in one motion without separate discussion. Council members may request that an item be removed by motion for discussion and separate action. Tonight we are approving city council minutes for 4 different meetings and approving of a utility bill credit for Summer Creek Apartments. Is there a motion? Actually, I'm sorry, I missed one other thing. As the local contract review board, we're also considering a contract award to Precision Locating Inc. for utility underground location services. Sorry, I missed that. So that is all on the consent agenda tonight.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, roll call vote, please.
Councillor Newton?
Yes.
Councillor Lube?
Yes.
Councillor Anderson?
Yes.
Mayor Snyder?
Yes.
And Council President Goodhouse?
Yes.
All right, the consent agenda passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a resolution of thanks recognizing our very own Councilor Tom Anderson for his service on the council. Oh, he apparently didn't read the agenda. This is a surprise to him?
No, just
oh, you don't want to talk about it, or you want to turn your camera off? Sorry, not going to happen.
Humble.
Yeah. So, Councilor Anderson, we want to recognize you for your dedicated service. We actually have a resolution in front of us, and I'm going to read it, and then each member of the council is probably going to say a little bit about you and to you. So the resolution that we're considering tonight reads as following. Whereas Tommy Anderson is a longtime city volunteer, business owner, and community advocate, is retiring from service as an elected Tigard City Councilor on December 31st, 2020. And whereas over the course of Councilor Anderson's service, the city faced unprecedented challenges from a worldwide pandemic, seasonal wildfires, and economic recession with corresponding city budget concerns, critical regional negotiations for Southwest Corridor transportation planning, downtown and Tigard Triangle Urban Renewal District planning and economic development, and addressing long-term provisions for affordable housing. And whereas Councilor Anderson skillfully served as Tigard's representative on several local and regional boards and committees to ensure the best future for the Tigard community. His gift for listening and careful consideration of multiple viewpoints on sometimes polarizing subject matter reassured residents that their elected leaders were listening. And whereas his steady influence contributed to important foundational work by Tigard's Budget Committee, Planning Commission, City Center Development Agency, Willamette River Water Coalition, and the Regional Water Providers Consortium, as well as gaining thanks from Tigard families and baseball players for his continuing and persistent advocacy for Tigard Little League activities. And whereas Councillor Anderson's extraordinary contributions in support of affordable housing, senior housing, and services for Tigard's homeless and vulnerable residents brought attention to an underserved and growing demographic. His advocacy for the new senior living community in the Tigard Triangle and plans for a senior affordable housing project at the Tigard Senior Center gave energy and focus to community interests, while his representation on Metro's Affordable Housing Committee kept stakeholder focus on preserving affordable housing and land for residents who could be displaced by the eventual arrival of the Southwest Corridor Light Rail. And whereas during his term in office, Councillor Anderson contributed to projects and progress on urban renewal district activities in downtown Tigard, including the Tigard Street Heritage Trail, Universal Plaza, Atwell off Main, mixed-use housing and retail project, Ash Avenue Dog Park, downtown public art, and in the Tigard Triangle, Red Rock Creek Commons by Community Partners for Affordable Housing, master planning the new Tigard Triangle, planning for equitable development to guide strategic investment in the Triangle for diversity and vitality to transform the area into a mixed-use and pedestrian-oriented district. He helped gain voter approval for a pioneering Tigard Police Public Safety Levy, shared insight on next phase planning for River Terrace, and contributed to updating our Metro Regional Water System Partnership planning. And therefore be it resolved by the Tigard City Council and staff that the Tigard City Council and staff members hereby thank and honor Councillor Anderson for his meritorious and dedicated service to the city in the past 4 years, and I would say, and far beyond that in your participation in boards and commissions for decades before. So why doesn't the council take action on this first, and then we can all speak to Councillor Anderson if we wish. Is there a motion?
I move to approve resolution number 20-63.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, please read the number and title of the resolution.
Resolution number 20-63, a resolution thanking Tom Anderson for his outstanding service to the City of Tigard.
And will the City Recorder please conduct a roll call vote?
Councillor Newton.
Yes.
Councillor Lube.
Yes.
Councillor Anderson.
Abstain.
Mayor Snyder.
Yes.
Council President Goodhouse.
Yes.
All right. So that motion carries four yeses and one abstention. I almost want to let Youth Councillor Calderon vote, but probably get me in trouble. It's not in the charter. Okay, so that passes essentially unanimously. So Councillor Anderson, I just want to thank you, as the resolution talks about, you are definitely someone who says more but talks less. You're very thoughtful. You've provided so much insight, I think, to the council on housing and work with homeless and just lots of different topics. I think that you when you speak, people listen because you choose your moments and you say very important things. So with that, I want to thank you, and I will let fellow councilors speak. Councillor Lube, you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. I just, I want to thank Councillor Anderson. When I came on board, he, gave of his time and expertise to really help me get on board, and sort of, I appreciate the companionship in that sort of way and the educational aspect. And whenever issues come to council, he always had insight and perspective especially in the real estate, and just he never hesitated sharing his expertise, and it made us all better. And so thank you. And I've really enjoyed working with you, and I hope I continue to see you in non-COVID times when we can all finally get together after this. So thank you for your service to the city.
Thanks, Ann.
Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Councilor Anderson, I'm really going to miss you. I'll miss your perspective. You were, after I rambled to get to my point, you usually could get to the heart of the matter very quickly. And I appreciated that. Your common sense approach, as the mayor said, sometimes you didn't say a lot, but what you said would just boil everything down to the heart of the matter, and I will miss that. I will also miss you. You were on the Planning Commission. You've been involved in a number of different areas in the city, and all of your contributions were important. You always had a perspective that I appreciated, and especially your work on affordable housing and work for the homeless. That was really valuable, and I learned a lot from you when you offered your perspective there. So I'm going to miss you, going to miss working with you, and I hope we see more of each other after we can see each other in person. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz.
And Councillor Anderson, on that point, don't think that you're getting away. Like, we'll be bringing you into work.
Okay.
Youth Councillor Calderon, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, Councillor Anderson, like the mayor said, you say more with less words, and I can truly say that your comments during council meetings, they really do change my mind. You're very insightful, and I always take what you say to heart. Just listening to what you've said, to what the mayor said about your accomplishments, that's just an incredible amount of work you've done for our community, and I would like to thank you on the behalf of the community for making Tigard a better place to live in.
And
thank you, Mayor.
Council President Goodhouse.
Yes, Councilor Anderson, thank you for all your help and involvement. I remember back ages ago when you used to be the Planning Commission chair and sitting in on some of those meetings and how you ran those meetings. You've been around for a long time. Great with land use, really helping, being a knowledgeable expert on that. We might have to have you in a future council meeting come in as an expert witness or help us out, because you've always been thorough, been on top of everything. So yeah, definitely want you to stay in touch, and with you having a downtown business, hopefully you also can be an ear for us down there of what's going right, what's going wrong, especially with the Main Street, Green Street 2 and urban renewal. But you've been great on the council, just been a sounding board on, straight shooter on everything. Always like I think it was Councilor Newton or Councilor Lube. One said that, wouldn't speak much, but at least you got to the point and summed it up quickly, and always had a great perspective on it. So we appreciate your time, and we're going to miss you.
Thanks, John.
So I also want to give staff that you've worked with an opportunity if they want to say anything, but I think there's a lot of people on the line. So what I'm going to ask staff to do that might want to speak would be to choose the raise their hand function in the Teams program. Are there any staff members that would like to speak? Mr. Asher.
Thank you, Mayor Snyder, and good evening, Councilor Anderson. We hate to see you go in the Community Development Department. It's been so great having you on the council. It was great having you on the Planning Commission, first of all. But it's been great having a true expert on the council who understands and appreciates land use and transportation issues, and who knows the ins and outs of Oregon's planning rules, which are arcane, as we all know, and also your business interests and your field. Your chosen field of work just dovetailed so well with everything that we brought to the council. You were always reliable as a supportive, inquisitive, helpful voice on the council. And I know if Tom McGuire were here tonight, he'd have his own way of putting it, but I know I speak for everybody in the Community Development Department and the engineers as well, as you know. everybody who works to try to grow the city and do that in an orderly fashion, you've been a part of that. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Kenny.
All right, City Attorney Rahala, you have your hand up as well?
Yes, thank you, Council. I echo everything else that has been said. Councilor Anderson, it's been a pleasure working with you. You've brought a great voice to Council. Your commitment to the community has been impressive, and it's been a pleasure. We'll miss you very much, and best of wishes in your next endeavors.
Thanks, Shelby.
All right. Well, thank you, Councilor Anderson. Again, you're not out of it yet. We still got to make it through this meeting. And yeah, I like Councilor Newton's idea there for a round of applause. All right. Let's move on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is a presentation.
Mayor,
yeah.
Let me say words too.
Oh, you want to say some words? I'm sorry, Councilor Anderson.
Just a few, right, as I'm known for. I would like to thank the staff. I've always felt respected and encouraged by the staff here, and of course, I've always felt prepared for all of our topics. They do a great job at that, and I learn something new every week, literally. And as far as my colleagues on the council, 2 councils, thank you guys for your passion serving the city of Tigard. It's what we all love. I enjoy hearing your insights as well and collaborating. Wish it wasn't COVID. I like being in person better, of course, but I will take some lifelong friendships from my 4 years. And going forward, I know that Tigard's in great hands, so I will enjoy my new schedule, my new time off. So thank you, everybody, for those kind words.
Like I said earlier, Councilor Anderson, don't get too comfortable because we'll be coming asking.
All right, I'll be around.
I don't know what it'll be, but it'll be something.
You didn't read the fine print of the resolution. We just locked you into being a consultant.
Well, you know where my office is.
All right, moving on to item number 4, presentation of the external financial audit by Moss Adams and comprehensive annual financial report. Mr. LaFrance.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Toby LaFrance, Finance and Information Services Director. And actually this evening, I want to give credit where credit is due. The work of the financial audit is done with our partners with Moss Adams and with Jared Isaacson, the Assistant Finance Director, and his team, including Amy Lawson. And so I'm going to hand over the presentation to Jim and Jared, and thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jared Isaacson, the Assistant Finance Director with the city, here this evening with Jim Lanzarotta from Moss Adams to present the annual financial report and the auditor's report. I'm going to go ahead and start the slide.
All right, thank you, Jared, and hopefully someone shout out, make sure you can hear me okay. Hopefully.
We can hear you just fine.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. You know, these Zoom and Microsoft Teams meetings and WebEx are always fun, but you know, there's got to be a snag somewhere. You guys are doing great. I haven't seen any snags yet, but anyway, appreciate the opportunity to come before you, Mayor Snyder, and council members and finish kind of the audit process, although we'll talk about a piece that's not quite done yet and the reasons for it. But the financial statement audit piece is done and issued, and so this is the final piece to report the findings to you. So I'm happy to do that. And what I'd like to do is talk about our team and kind of what you engaged Moss Adams to do. I'll talk about just of course, the results of that. I'll give you a few details of the audit process and what was unique about that. We've issued a written communication that has certain required elements to it. I'll just cover a couple highlights of that. We did identify maybe a couple best practices, and so we'll chat about that. And then I always like to kind of keep you apprised of what's coming at the city down the pike. So if you could advance maybe a couple slides there, Jared.
I don't happen to see any slides. I don't know if it's only me or.
I can
Jared,
see
would you
that.
like us to present the presentation for you?
Yes, please, Mike. That'd be great.
Okay, hold on 1 second.
So I'm actually seeing the slides, so I'm curious, but that's all right. Well, maybe I could just kind of keep going. There's I just wanted to mention our engagement team is pretty much intact. You know, it's kind of nice to have continuity. There we go. Can you all see that now? And there should be a.
No,
Excellent.
I don't.
Huh. All right. Well, I don't know.
I might be the only one though, so I'm not going to speak for everyone.
Councillor Newton, I can see it.
Councillor Lube, I can see it as well.
Okay.
Councilor Anderson can see it.
Councilor Shaw can see it.
Youth
Oh,
City
shoot, sorry.
Councilor.
All
Why
right.
don't you continue, Mr. Lanzaretta?
Okay. Thank you. So just was mentioning our team. I'm just fortunate to kind of have it intact pretty much for the length of our contract so far with the city. So you can see me up there. I'm the partner responsible for our engagement and signing our reports and making sure that we meet all of the requirements of our firm and the professional standards. And we have asked Amanda McCleary Moore to step up on the engagement. Many of you may be aware that I am retiring at the end of this year. And so Amanda will step in as the overall partner. Keith Simovic, our senior manager, has really been a key person to work with Jared and Toby and your staff. And Keith is an up-and-comer in our firm. I can't really tell you that he will be a partner next year, but I think there's a good chance of that. And Keith's done a good job. And Harvey Wang is our manager, and I'm very proud of Harvey. He has decided to hang out his career in the governmental realm. So I'm really excited. He's doing well with us and has been on your audit for a number of years. In fact, some of you might remember he was on our pitch team when we came in and for the interview to pick up your external audit. Anyway, we're glad to see Harvey decide to go down the governmental path for his career. Go ahead. Next slide. So our audit, kind of there's 6 phases that you could look at it in, I suppose. And the first one is the most obvious. I mean, you're asking us to come in and do some work that independently verifies the accuracy of the city's financial statements. And I suspect you understand that's done in a number of ways. And I have a slide, I'll go into a few of those details. So obviously we did that. You're fortunate, Jared and his team are able to put your financial statements together. Now, maybe they get a little bit of help here and there, but you're putting that document together. A majority of governmental entities in Oregon rely on either their auditor or someone else to help them put the financials together to meet all of the requirements. And not only do you meet the requirements of the governmental accounting standards, but you've packed in some additional elements that enable you to apply for an excellence award from the Government Finance Officers Association. So the second box is just there to tell you that part of our service is to do that technical review of that document, make sure it's consistent with what we audited, the balances and numbers we audited, has all the requirements, but also does it meet these additional GFOA requirements? And we believe that it does. And I'm sure, hopefully, Jared will talk to you about some of the results of that Award of Excellence program. A third element, since you receive federal awards and by contract, you ask your auditor to also follow government auditing standards. So that adds an additional element for us to look at things like fraud, waste, and abuse, but it also requires reporting to you on your internal controls, those checks and balances that management uses to get the numbers right. And if there are weaknesses, we've got to report that to you. So that's a part of our audit. A fourth element, you are an Oregon Municipal Corporation, and the state audits division tells us as auditors that when we audit a government entity in Oregon, we also have to test your compliance with certain state laws and issue a report on that. There's a number of areas we test, like your budget, the whole budget process of adoption and administration of a budget during the year, public procurement, where you deposit your cash and investments, risk financing activities, those sorts of things. So that's an element. And we want to point out that not only do we audit the city, but in the box 5 here, we also do a separate audit for the urban renewal agency, the Town Center Development Agency, and issue reports on that. And then the final piece is really just the communication. We really appreciate that you have an audit committee, and that gives us an opportunity to go in even more detail than we're doing tonight. And we meet with your audit committee on at the beginning of the audit to talk about the risks and how we're going to approach it, get their feedback, and then we meet with them as we're concluding to really dive into the results. And you've got a pretty engaged audit committee. Really appreciate the discourse and the questions they ask. They're doing a great job for the city. Go ahead. Advance the slide. So I have a slide that's just high level, but it gives you a little bit of maybe an idea of how we approach the audit. We sometimes use a kind of a strange analogy, but if you imagine a bucket, and our job is to fill that bucket with evidence. And when the bucket's full, we know we're done. And we fill that bucket in 3 different ways here. One is by looking at those internal controls and testing them. So if the city has a very effective internal control over an account balance or a transaction cycle, and we're able to test it and determine that those controls are designed well and they're functioning and they're being observed, that puts some evidence in our bucket. Usually we've got to do a combination. Usually no single one of these will fill our bucket. Sometimes it does. Usually it's a combination. So another way we get evidence is analytical procedures. You'd be surprised how much of your account balances can be guessed, or we can come up with an expectation that's fairly precise. And certain balances are, driven off of other transactions, like payroll taxes are driven off of payroll, or your revenues from water is rates times volume of water delivered. So we can build expectations, and to the extent the numbers come out to that, that's evidence we can put in the bucket. And then finally, the one that's probably the most labor intensive is the substantive procedures. That's where we're diving into invoices and contracts and looking at the minutes of your meetings to try to verify numbers, transactions, balances. We can confirm balances directly with your bank and custodian of your monies. And so when our bucket's full, we know that we've done enough work over a particular area of your financial statements. Go ahead, advance the slide if you would. Mine's kind of bouncing around. I don't know if that's doing it for you, but anyway, just wanted to mention the unique nature of this year's engagement. I mean, just given the environment where, Moss Adams decided that we're not going to have our employees come into the office, and we're not really allowing them to go to our clients' offices either. You have to have, kind of special permission. I know a lot of the city staff have to go in, but a number of you have worked remotely as well. So we performed the audit entirely remotely this year. And I don't know if we could have done it 5 years ago, but fortunately our electronic and technological tools have advanced to allow us to do this. And my hat's off to city staff that had to provide more information electronically. In some cases, we had to share screens to look at stuff together, and just a little bit of extra effort. And to get the job done is just phenomenal. So really appreciate the level of effort of city staff to accommodate our procedures in this strange environment. Along with this remote working, though, there were some additional risks that we were worried about, which, you know, if the city staff and key members are working from home, well, how are we maintaining controls when things are approvals and certain transactions are happening while folks are working from home? So we focused on what the city was doing to make sure that they had good controls in place for this remote environment, and transactions were occurring only after they were approved and appropriate. Another area we were focused on is, you know, obviously there's financial impacts to our governmental clients. Sometimes revenue streams are significantly reduced. Sometimes expenses are significantly increased to handle COVID responses. And the financial statements need to transparently reflect that information. So a little more effort on our part, looking at the city's financials to make sure that they were being transparent in the impacts of COVID to the city. So a little uniqueness to this year's engagement. If you'd go ahead and advance the slide there. So this is the part where, okay, we did all this work, and what did we find? And this is really good news to the city. So we did the work, and we're able to issue what we call an unmodified opinion in our jargon. In layman's terms, that's a clean opinion. That's the best you can get. So after all the work of your staff, day in and day out, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and year end, they were able to produce an accurate document, and our work supported that it was accurate, so we could give that clean opinion. On the government auditing standards report, where we talk about internal controls or non-compliance or fraud, waste, and abuse, that report had no findings. So there were no issues that were of a nature that we needed to bring to your attention. On the Oregon minimum standards report, this is all those state laws we're required to test. And these are unique because this is a pass-fail. I mean, you could overexpend your budget by $1, and we have to report it. And we're pleased to tell you that we have no findings. So you were found to be in compliance with the 7 or 8 laws that we're required to test. On the single audit, so this is where we audit the federal grant programs that you receive. This is the piece that's not yet done. And the reason for that is that you received a fair amount of CARES Act resources that we're required to test. And the document that tells us how to test it has not been issued by the federal government yet. I'm told that there's a good chance it will be released Friday, but we'll need to get it, and then that will help us understand what compliance requirements apply, and then some suggested audit procedures to do the testing there. So that piece is not yet done, and will happen probably in January, I'm guessing. So really good news to the city on the results of our audit. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Go ahead and advance the slide if you would. So I'm not going to go into this. We did issue this in a written form, but I figure as council members not on the audit committee, you might be pleased to know that there are a couple things that we did not encounter. You know, we had no disagreements with management. We didn't experience any degree of trying to, you know, not provide information or to be evasive in our questioning. No difficulties were presented. In terms of audit adjustments, that's where we find an error that's of a magnitude that we need to get management to post that adjustment. And we did not have any of those. And in fact, if you'd advance the slide, we only have one item that we've been tracking for a while. It relates to a bond issuance several years ago where there is a certain accounting for a difference between cash flows when you refund And that accounting didn't happen quite right. So there's an impact until that would amortize off into your interest expense. So we're just kind of carrying the remainder of that until it drops below a level that we feel we need to bring it to your attention. So it's just an accounting, a full accrual accounting issue. It doesn't affect cash or your budget or how you operate within the city. Go ahead and advance the slide. You know, in any audit, we try to make certain observations of things that we see, and we compare them to best practices to try to bring to your attention. And we've had, you know, a few areas here. One of these is kind of a carryover, one or more of these, but a couple areas where improvements could be made in utility billing, in the review of folks that can make changes to rates. An IT user access observation and recommendation. And then the final one's really one that kind of affects the you as council members as well. And it's the continuing observation that we don't really have an ironclad agreement with this Lake Oswego Tigard water partnership. And, you know, the observation there is that without an ironclad agreement, you know, things can pop up that might surprise you. I mean, who is obligated to do what kinds of repairs and maintenance, just the responsibilities of the parties. And also from an audit perspective, without an ironclad agreement there, we're concerned with whether the city is transparently reflecting its rights and obligations relative to access to the infrastructure in the financial statements. So we've obviously spent a fair amount of time, and I think that Toby and Jared and crew have done a good job of reflecting the nature of the understanding of the parties in the financial statements up to now. So those would be our observations, and we're almost done. Go ahead and advance the slide. So the last thing here is just showing you all of the accounting standards that are issued that Toby and Jared and Amy and others need to implement for the city. The first one there is a gift. So GASB issued number 95 to give governments more time to implement these standards, just given the environment we're in. So fortunately, we've got at least another year on all of these. And I'm not going to go into these, but I do also bring this up because you've been pretty supportive of providing Toby and Jared and others education to keep on top of this. And I'm here to hopefully support and ask for your continued support to allow them to get the training necessary to stay on top of this stuff. And Moss Adams provides free training. We did a series of 8 or 9 webcasts last year. We'll probably do that again. And when we can come back in person, we'll continue to do in-person training in the Portland area for our government clients and friends. And go ahead and advance the slide. And really the last thing is, again, just to acknowledge the efforts here. You know, Toby is very well known amongst his peers in Oregon. I really appreciate the level of effort he puts into providing time and resources and information to his peers through the Oregon Government Finance Officers Association and so forth. Jared has just done a great job getting your financials put together on time. Amy's been great to work with. And I just appreciate the additional effort they had to put in given this odd remote environment. Things went well given all of that. And the other thing I noticed, you know, we had a chance to talk with Mayor Snyder. I think we've talked with Councilmember Lube in the past, of course, your audit committee, and the tone at the city is just fantastic. So you provide a great, you know, role model for others in terms of the transparency and ethics. And so that kind of mirrors through the city based on our interviews and interactions with city staff. So we very much appreciate the tone that you set at the city for your folks. And I feel like I just went 900 miles an hour. So I want to make sure I stop and give folks an opportunity to answer any questions you might have, or help explain stuff that may not have been explained well enough for you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lanzaretta, and thank you for your service to our city over the last number of years. And I know that you've got some exciting things that you have planned in retirement. I know we've talked about that, so I hope that goes well. I know you already planned to not retire, to kind of fail in your retirement. So I'm sure we'll see you. Council members have any questions? Council President Goodhouse.
Okay, I got it. Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on the aspect with the Lake Oswego Tigard Water Partnership. I know that's something we're in the discussion with. Councilor Newton and I have been working on that for a while. I know previously the Mayor Snyder and Mayor Cook were working on that as well. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what the areas need to be shored up on?
Yeah, when it is common. I appreciate the creativity which we're seeing. This is another example of it, where you're partnering with other governmental entities to deliver services. So there's infrastructure there which you've invested in. So obviously the city issued bonds, and you put a fair amount of cash into the water plant and distribution lines, and there generally is an intergovernmental agreement put together, or some sort of a governing document that lays out the responsibilities of the parties, the ownership of the assets, how you're going to share the operating expenses, how are you going to share the future replacements. It just really lays out the rights and obligations of the parties, and that wasn't completed, and I'm not sure if it's completed yet. I believe you have a memorandum of understanding. I believe there's certain things that you're operating under with the city of Lake Oswego, but this is kind of an unusual arrangement that you have without an intergovernmental agreement that really lays all of those elements out.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's something that we're working on right now. The final steps are kind of working on either a IGA or a governing body or something like that. So that any additional information probably would be helpful for us going forward on that.
Yeah, one of the things that, of course, we've talked with Toby about is, you issued debt, and it's important for you to be able to report your investment in the capital assets on your balance sheet. And so when you put that intergovernmental agreement together, or whatever the governing document is, we need to be careful so that the city can follow the appropriate accounting standards and still have capital assets, or your share in them, your investment in them, is still reflected on your balance sheet to meet certain bond requirements. So there's an element there I know we've talked to Toby about in the past that will want to inform you as you put together whatever that governing document is.
Thank you. Other council questions or comments? And we are actually running a little bit behind, so I want to move us on. You may not know that, but we I think on our suggested summary, we missed an item that was left off of it inadvertently. So, Mr. Lanzaretta, did you have anything more that you wanted to say, or council, any final questions or comments?
Not for me, Mayor.
Councilor Lube?
I want to make sure that we really thank Jared and Toby and the finance staff for doing an incredible job and a lot of work in these really hard times, and to push it through and to get the audit completed in a very timely manner, and to have a clean audit, and it's just an incredible job, and we're lucky to have Jared. And Jim, I wish you nothing but the best in your retirement. Thank you for all of your audit service to the city, and we look forward to hearing what you're doing next.
All right, thank you.
All right. we are going to move on to what we should have considered but missed, and that is to consider a lease agreement for the senior center with Meals on Wheels people. Director Robinson, are you ready for a staff report?
I am. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Nadine Robinson, the Central Services Director. I'm here tonight to request a motion to approve a 5-year lease for the Tigard Senior Center with Meals on Wheels people and authorization for the city manager to sign that lease. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the Meals on Wheels people program. It's been active in Tigard for decades, providing services for older adults at the Tigard Senior Center since 1982. Their program is a great fit with the city's strategic plan. They provide nutritious meals for nominal cost, not only to seniors, but other community members. They also provide various social programs, and between their programming and their volunteer opportunities, they provide a chance for intergenerational interactions, all of which support a healthy and accessible Tigard. In 2019, the Meals on Wheels people program served and delivered over 46,000 meals to 788 older persons in Tigard. They were able to do this with as few as 35 very dedicated volunteers, and this lease, if approved, will continue this history of support for older adults in the Tigard community. The proposed lease allows the Meals on Wheels people to continue to use the Tigard Senior Center for meals and programming services for another 5 years. And we were able to do that by basically keeping the same terms that they've had. But there were just a few changes that I wanted to point out. In Section 6, under use of facilities, the requirement to develop a method to monitor the performance of the Meals on Wheels program was removed. Meals on Wheels people track their performance, and they're always willing to provide data. As an example, the data I just provided about the number of meals and volunteers, that was all provided by Tigard Center Director Vicki Adams in a grant application. The second change was to remove language allowing the city to access Meals on Wheels people equipment, dishes, and utensils. Since we're not currently renting out the senior center, this just puts our current practices in alignment with the lease. If we decide that we want to make that facility available to the public in the future, we can renegotiate that. And then the last change in this section was to add verbiage to address parking, knowing that the planned housing could require further discussions between the city and Meals on Wheels people. In Section 18, we added a communications escalation clause. Although the relationship between city and center staff is excellent, the new language is in keeping with standardization of the facility leases. And then if we have any issues that come up during construction, it also gives us a way to work those through. So we think that could be beneficial. And then finally, other updates were made to the boilerplate terms such as indemnifications, remedies, and again, that was as part of standardizing the facilities lease language. So those are the few leases or the few changes that we've that I wanted to point out related to the lease. As I mentioned, just a few. It's because our lease has been very successful over the last 5 years. One thing I did want to point out before we moved on was I just wanted to remind council and the public the senior center is required to be used for older adult services and programming through November of 2028. It was built and then remodeled with community development block grant funds. And so if the city chooses to not use the building for these services, then the city would need to repay the grant to the federal government. And so the lease before you tonight was provided to the Meals on Wheels people executive director, Suzanne Washington, who's indicated acceptance of the proposed lease. Ms. Washington is here this evening and also available to answer questions you might have about the program or about the lease. And this concludes my presentation. We're happy to answer any questions you may have before considering a motion to approve the lease and authorize the city manager to sign it.
Thank you, Director Robinson. And I just want to say that, you know, the Tigard Senior Center and the services that Meals on Wheels people provides is incredible to our community. Not only because it's providing service to seniors in our community, but also because of all the community connections and frankly the hundreds of volunteers that work and participate in the programs, and also therefore connect with with seniors and others in the community. So I just want to state that at the outset. It's a very valuable program to our community overall. And Director Robinson, just because we don't have the normal info we have on this item, can you just restate what the staff's recommended action is for the council to take this evening?
Absolutely. The recommendation tonight is that council approve the 5-year lease with Meals on Wheels people for the Tigard Senior Center, and that they authorize the city manager to sign the lease.
Okay. So council, any questions or a motion?
I move to approve a 5-year lease with Meals on Wheel people for the Tigard Senior Center and authorize the city manager to sign the lease. I wrote it down.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councilor Newton. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, before we vote, it looks like we may have lost Council President Goodhouse on the meeting. He's trying to rejoin right now.
Okay, we'll wait a moment until he rejoins.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just take this opportunity to say what a wonderful program Meals on Wheels is, and it's just something that, you know, my life has been affected by personally. I had grandparents who had meals delivered years ago, and it's just such an incredible service that's provided. So thank you, and I love that you're at the Tigard Senior Center.
Ms. Washington, did you want to add anything or about the program, or specifically Tigard's program?
Yes, just thank you very much. We love our partnership there and our ability to do the work for across all of the Tigard community. And volunteers coming from your community are fantastic. We love the drivers. We now have friendly chatters who are really talking to the seniors that are homebound, especially during the pandemic. So we have I don't know how many in Tigard, but I could get back to you about it. Just, we have hundreds and hundreds of volunteers making those calls to seniors. So we look forward to getting back into doing programming. We're also doing virtual programming while this is happening. So we're doing virtual bingo and virtual book clubs and all sorts of things. So hopefully come summer, we'll be back and be able to do some congregate dining and other programming for folks to get out of their homes and connect. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, do we have Council President Goodhouse back on the line, Mr. Nolop?
We do, yes, now. Thank you very much for the pause, yep.
All right, Council President Goodhouse, did you hear the motion?
No.
All right, Councilor Lube, would you mind making or just informing Council President Goodhouse of what motion you made, and then it was seconded by Councilor Newton.
Sure. I move to approve a 5-year lease with Meals on Wheel people for the Tigard Senior Center and authorize the city manager to sign the lease.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we'll go to a roll call vote from the city recorder.
Councilor Newton? Councilor Luke?
Yes.
Councilor Anderson?
Yes.
Mayor Snyder?
Yes.
And Council President Goodhouse?
Yes.
All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to the next item on the agenda. Consider resolution to appoint audit committee members. Mr. LaFrance, you are going to present this item?
Actually, Mayor, I'm going to present again for the audit committee.
Okay.
Jared Isaacson, the Assistant Finance Director for the City of Tigard. I'm here this evening to seek approval for a resolution appointing audit committee members. Vacancies were caused by Stephanie Veal, Jeremy Nichols, and Larry Atchison fulfilling their terms. To recruit for the vacancies, our communications divisions did extensive outreach to include promoted the community round. It was promoted to the community roundtable, featured in Somos Tigard Facebook group, highlighted board openings in a Tiger Life ad and Mayor's Corner, followed up with the 31 applicants who were not selected for the Public Safety Advisory Board, promoted to over 23,000 Nextdoor connections, over 7,000 Twitter followers, almost 3,000 Instagram followers, and over 8,000 Facebook followers. It was spotlighted multiple times in Cityscape and Recreation newsletter, and it was posted on the City Hall reader board for 7 days. On Thursday, November 5th, the appointing committee of Councilors Lube and Newton interviewed 3 candidates and recommended that council approve Elizabeth Gills Carbo to a 3-year position and Darlene Dick and Fiona Howell Earl to 2-year positions. And this concludes our report, and we're like to take any questions anyone has.
Are any of them present this evening?
I saw that Darlene Dick and Elizabeth Gills Carbo are present.
All right. Well, we want to thank you. We're going to act on this in a moment. And as is typical in person, I would be handing you a City of Tigard pin and thanking you for your service. Once we voted on the resolution, in COVID times, we will mail you that pin. So just so you're aware. And if you want to just briefly say hi after we act on the resolution, you're welcome to do so. Council, is there a motion?
I move to approve resolution number 20-64.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, please read the number and title of the resolution.
Resolution number 20-64. A resolution appointing Elizabeth Gills Carbo, Darlene Dick, and Fiona Howell Earl as voting members to the Audit Committee.
And a roll call vote.
Councilor Newton.
Yes.
Councilor Lube.
Yes.
Councilor Anderson.
Yes.
Mayor Snyder.
Yes.
Council President Goodhouse.
Yes.
All right, motion is adopted unanimously. And Darlene and Elizabeth, are you both present? And do you want to quickly say hi to the council and the community? And I want to again thank you for volunteering. And I guess, let's see if there was Fiona, if you're present too and we just missed you, certainly welcome to do that as well.
Great, thanks for the opportunity to serve.
Well, thank you. Darlene, did you want to say anything? All right. Well, thank you both. Interim City Manager Nyland, you'll make sure they get their pins from me?
Of course, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to item number 6, which is to consider resolution to appoint Town Center Advisory Commission members. Mr. Fairley.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Sean Farley, Redevelopment Project Manager, and I'm here tonight to request approval of a resolution that will appoint members to the Town Center Advisory Commission. And for those at home, the Town Center Advisory Commission is the volunteer advisory board on urban renewal issues, make recommendations on budget and implementation for the city center and the Tiger Triangle TIF urban renewal plans. So we had 6 member openings and up to 2 alternate member openings and up to 2 ex officio member openings. We had an extensive recruitment process similar to what Jared mentioned before. And we interviewed about 15 people, 9 of whom hadn't served on a board or commission before. And Councilor Goodhouse, who is the Mayor's Appointment Committee, he took special interest and reached out to some additional downtown business and property owners to make sure they're represented as is suggested in the bylaws. So tonight we are reappointing Tom Murphy, Ryan Ruggiero, and Scott Hancock, and also reappointing Justin Watson as an ex officio member. And then we're appointing Chris Sojin and Adrian Hinckley and Derek Wright as voting members. and appointing Chris Cash and Chris Mitchell as non-voting alternate members. And I believe there are several here tonight. Adrian Hinckley, Chris Cash, Chris Sojin, Derek Wright, and Chris Mitchell.
Okay, so we will allow them to introduce themselves after we act on this resolution. Is there a motion?
I move to approve resolution.
Go ahead.
Number 20-65.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, please read the number and title of the resolution.
Resolution number 20-65, a resolution reappointing Scott Hancock, Tom Murphy, and Ryan Ruggiero, and appointing Adrian Hinckley, Chris Sojin, and Derek Wright as voting members of the Town Center Advisory Commission, Chris Cash and Chris Mitchell as non-voting alternate members, and Justin J. Watson as a non-voting ex officio member.
And City Recorder, roll call vote, please.
Councilor Newton.
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Councilor Lube.
Yes.
Councilor Anderson.
Yes.
Mayor Snyder.
Yes.
Council President Goodhouse.
Yes.
All right. Motion's adopted unanimously. Congratulations to the various members of our community that were just appointed. And I am going to call on each of you individually to just try to keep this in some semblance of order. And as you heard a moment ago, I will also ask the city manager to mail you a City of Tigard pin. We normally hand you one and congratulate you and thank you for serving our community. In COVID times, that ends up being in the mail. Adrian Hinckley, would you like to quickly say hi?
Sure. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to working with the city and all of you. And yeah, it's going to be a fun experience, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chris, I should be clear on which Chris. We got three Chris's, or at least three. Chris Children.
Hey everybody. Yeah, this is Chris. So like the first thing there. So the name is actually Scholin. Like the J is similar to a CH sound. It's a Swedish name that I acquired from my wife. But yeah, super excited to be part of the planning to make sure that Tigard gets where we want it to be in the next few years.
And thank you for teaching us something new tonight too. That's awesome.
Yeah, and that J will almost always be that the CH sound in that instance, in other people's names too.
Okay, thank you. Derek Wright.
Hello. Yes, I would like to say that I'm very excited to help out and provide my community. Thank you very much for everyone that Sean and John that reached out to me.
Thank you, Derek. And Chris Cash. Mr. Cash, if you are speaking, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We can barely hear you, but yes.
I would like to thank, well, first of all, thank Mayor Snyder. I would like to thank John Goodhouse and Sean Farley for the opportunity to help serve on this committee. I am a property owner on Main Street, Tigard, and would like to help to improve a lot more business into downtown.
Thank you, Chris. And we share in that vision. So that is excellent. And thank you for volunteering. Mr. Mitchell.
Hi, I'm Chris Mitchell, and happy to be amongst so many Chris's, as well as the city officials. So thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
And Chris, I apologize. I got too many male Chris's on my mind. Sorry about that.
No problem. I'll respond to sir as well.
Thank you for helping me out tonight. I appreciate that. And welcome. Justin Watson. All right. So thank you very much. You'll all receive a Tigered pin in the mail, and thank you for your service. And we are going to move on to our next item on the agenda, which is we are going to convene as the Town Center Development Agency Board for the next agenda item, which is to discuss a substantial amendment to the city center plan. Mr. Fairley.
Good evening, Chair Snyder and the directors of the Town Center Development Agency Board. My name is Sean Farley, Redevelopment Project Manager. I'm here tonight with Elaine Howard, who is our consultant helping us out with the substantial amendment. And tonight we are requesting the board of the TCDA to forward the draft substantial amendment of the City Center Urban Renewal Plan and the accompanying report for public review. That will initiate the official public process for adopting the amendment. And I'm going to attempt to bring my PowerPoint up. Bear with me for a moment.
Mr. Fairley, would you like us to pull that one up for you as well?
Yeah, it looks like it's not. Oh, wait a minute. I got it. Okay. Can people see that? Can everybody see that?
Yes.
I can see it.
Great. So yeah, the first slide here is an image taken from our updated downtown vision. And first thing we'd like to do is talk about some of the successes we've had since 2006. So we went back and did some analysis, and we found that there's been about $50 million of private investment into property improvements and new construction. And looking back even further, we found that was about 3 times the amount of investment from the 12 years preceding the urban renewal district. And we looked at the increase in assessed values and have found that in the district, the property values have gone up 64% between 2006 and 2019. And that is outperforming the citywide. The property value increase has been 56%. We've given 28 matching grants for building improvements to downtown businesses, and those grants have leveraged $2.60 for every $1 of public money expended. There's been 234 new apartments constructed, and that's a large increase compared to the rest of the city, 32% increase in the number of housing units in the city center district compared to 12% increase in the rest of Tigard. So the proposed amendment, we'd like to increase the maximum indebtedness by $20.8 million to allow for additional funds to complete projects that are in the plan and then some new ones. And that would bring the total maximum indebtedness to $42.8 million. So the original maximum indebtedness is $22 million. As urban renewal districts go around Oregon, that's a pretty modest amount. So this increase in maximum indebtedness will get us up to a point where we can complete a lot of the projects that are in motion and continue the momentum that's happening downtown. So this would allow new debt to be issued until 2036. And again, the plan was originally approved by voters in 2006 There was a substantial amendment in 2017 that added 38 acres to the district. And, one of the issues was that, the plan formed in 2006, and that was right before the Great Recession. And that definitely had an impact on our, on the tax increment financing funds, and very little development happened for a few years. So that's another reason why we're finding we would need more funds. So the approval process is the board of the TCDA is going to initiate the public review process. And then because we're asking for this level of maximum indebtedness, we could ask for, we could just go ahead and do 25% of the original maximum indebtedness. But we're asking for more, and for that requires approval of the taxing districts that represent 75% of the permanent levy rate. And they have to do that by a resolution of their boards. So the 4 largest taxing districts are, the City of Tigard, and then the Tigard-Tualatin School District, Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue, and Washington County. And once if those boards do approve that, and then if council approves sending it out to the voters, it still has to be approved by the voters. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Elaine Howard, and she's going to do a really quick crash course on urban renewal, just to refresh memories, and if there's people watching in the audience who don't know how urban renewal or TIF districts work. Elaine, take it away.
Thanks, Sean. So this graphic just shows how regular property taxes typically go to regular taxing jurisdictions. It's a direct line from the assessor's office to those regular taxing jurisdictions, the city, the county, and the other jurisdictions. Property taxes increase in Oregon for 2 reasons: either a 3% limitation increase, that is the total amount you can increase, the assessor can increase anybody's property taxes unless there is new construction or substantial improvements. Next slide. If there is an urban renewal area formed in the city, the increases in property tax revenue from that urban renewal area from the time it's adopted goes to an urban renewal agency. So that is just those properties within the urban renewal area, the total amount of property tax revenue from the increase from when it's adopted. Next slide. So you can see as that blue line increases over time, those revenues end up going to the urban renewal agency. The property tax revenues at the time that it was established continue going to all of the other taxing jurisdictions. Next slide. This just shows this in a different format so that people can understand that typically urban renewal areas start at the beginning when there are depressed conditions or areas of under or undevelopment. At that time, an urban renewal area is established and the assessor does something called establishing a frozen base. That doesn't mean property taxes are frozen. It just means that's the value on which all of the taxing jurisdictions continue getting their taxes over the life of the urban renewal area. You can see that in most urban renewal areas, they start out getting increment very slowly. As Sean mentioned at the beginning of your area, we had the Great Recession. So that line of the slow amount for your area would be extended. At the end of an urban renewal area, when it expires, all of that increased assessed value within the area gets returned to be distributed to all of the impacted taxing jurisdictions. The schools are a little bit different in that for your local school district and your education service district, those impacts are not direct, they are indirect, which means the impact of that money is on the state school fund. All of your schools are funded on a per pupil basis as established by the legislature. That per pupil funding does not go down just because there's urban renewal in any one community. Urban renewal across the state of Oregon impacts the state school fund, but there are other resources used in allocating monies through the state school fund. Next slide. goes back to Sean.
Thanks, Elaine. So I'm going to quickly go through some of the specific projects that have been successful in our City Center Urban Renewal District. At Wolof, Maine, that was a public-private partnership, and that was, turning the Public Works Yard, which was a city-owned facility that wasn't generating property tax, and working out a deal for a developer to build a mixed-use market-rate apartment building, 165 units. And as you can see next door, there was immediate impact on it, and the neighbor decided, well, there's a nice building next to me, I'm going to improve my building. And so they turned an old parking garage into a pretty nice martial arts facility, multi-story. Main Street and Burnham Street improvements, particularly Main Street has really attracted a lot of new investment. A lot of the, popular businesses have located where these improvements were done. These improvements, made pedestrian safety a priority, made crossings a lot safer, added amenities, wider sidewalks, green street treatments, and the second half, the phase 2 of Main Street, Green Street, will be happening later this year. The Taggart Heritage Trail, part of that is in the district, and all of Rotary Plaza. So Urban Renewal did help fund the Rotary Plaza as well as the public restrooms. And this is a really important path for recreation and for people commuting, and has all sorts of art, cultural, and historic installations along the way. City Center Futures Project is a responsible council goal. We analyzed our district and what we might do, and decided that substantial amendment would be in order. And we also developed some new drawings of the vision, updating the downtown vision, as well as a redevelopment action plan that has a kind of a blueprint of public investments that will attract more private investment downtown. And then here's a few of the other projects we've done. Won't go through all of them, but they're probably familiar to most people. So some projects that are happening now, Main Street at Fenno Creek. That's where the Urban Renewal Agency bought a property that was in disrepair, and turned out to be a brownfield. So we were able to get a grant from the EPA and clean up the site. And once that site was cleaned up, it was a lot easier to get developer interest in it. And we do have a development agreement that should result in development breaking ground this spring. Right now, we are currently doing concept design on the Universal Plaza, which is going to be really important for the future of the district, a central gathering place for the city, and a water feature, which is the #1 most requested amenity from Tigard residents that we've talked to. And we are continuing with our urban renewal improvement program for matching grants in the downtown. So the additional funds from the substantial amendment, they are going to help us achieve many goals. Constructing new streets to provide connectivity. A lot of the blocks in downtown are very big, and it's hard to get around. New streets will improve connectivity and also open up larger blocks for more development. Another project is we'd like to continue the Taggart Heritage Trail to Hall Boulevard. Do a similar treatment pathway to Hall. Do some Fano Creek Trail improvements. The Universal Plaza, as we'll be briefing you next month, there might be 2 phases to the plaza, and there might be we might have to defer some of the concept to a phase 2, and that would be building shade structures, a community room, and the final features of the plaza. This would also fund a shared parking structure. It would be in conjunction with the new potential new city facility, and that city, that project would open up our current campus for redevelopment for a substantial amount of new private development, as well as affordable housing. There'd be more affordable housing and mixed-use development assistance, and pedestrian safety and streetscape improvements, and land acquisition that would help further redevelopment. So now I'm going to turn it back to Elaine, who's going to talk about the impacts to taxing districts.
The urban renewal is funded through division of taxes, so the impacts are on taxing districts. We believe that there are also a number of positive impacts to taxing districts from this amendment. It will provide projects in the area that will help enhance development opportunities, so increasing the assessed value for the future. The key site of the existing city hall, if that project moves forward, that key site can be developed into a great amount of new housing. So it would provide both additional housing to support your downtown, but also increased assessed value. The amendment will provide more affordable housing. And as I said today in one of our meetings with one of the taxing districts, affordable housing has become a key issue across the state, as we all know, and providing housing at a level for our key workers is really important. The amendment would extend the division of taxes, which is that tax impact on all of the taxing districts from fiscal year end 2036 to fiscal year end 2049. What that means is if the amendment doesn't go through, the impacts on the taxing districts would end in fiscal year end 2036. If it does go through at the rate that we are asking, at the amount of increase of a little in excess of $20 million, the impacts would go through fiscal year end 2049. Next slide. I'm going to talk about something else here that we added into the TBFNR slide, and that is if this amendment is adopted, revenue sharing would also be in effect for all the taxing districts starting in fiscal year end 2036. So a portion of the new value, the new increase in value, would be shared back with the taxing districts. And that is in the report on the amendment that you were provided. So it is in the information also that will be transmitted to all the taxing districts when this goes out to them. So the process and timeline is on December 9th, the TCAC, the advisory committee, recommended approval. And tonight it goes to you all, the board, and your action would send this out really for the formal review process, which would be the January 4th meeting in front of the Planning Commission, sending letters to all of the impacted taxing jurisdictions. They get a 45-day time period by statute to review that and respond. A city council hearing is scheduled for February 9th. Before that hearing, we are looking for resolutions from all of the 4 impacted taxing districts, the city, the county, TBFNR, and the school district. If we go through and accomplish all of those steps, which we hope to do, the ballot measure would be on the May 18th ballot to be reviewed by the Tigard voters. So that's the end of the formal presentation, and I know the mayor was at one of the taxing district meetings, and Councilor Goodhouse was at the other meeting today with TBFNR, so they could provide information about those meetings, or if there's any other information you'd like from Sean or me, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Before we start the questions and comments, Mr. Fairley, can you state exactly what action, or are you looking for informal head nods tonight, or are you actually looking for us to make a specific motion, or what is the staff seeking tonight?
Yeah, a motion to forward the draft substantial amendment of the plan and the accompanying report for public review.
Okay, so we are looking for a formal motion. All right, questions, comments from councilors? Councilor Anderson.
No questions.
Youth Councillor Calderon.
No questions, but I appreciated the crash course, so thank you.
Urban Renewal for Dummies. It was good. Actually, Elaine, I will compliment you on that. I think the presentation you did to as a reminder to the school board was really helpful too. So thank you. And this was that's a very similar presentation. So that's excellent. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just two quick questions. I think Mr. Farley, I think you talked about this in the timeline, but I missed it. So does the 45 days start now for the districts to take action? You said something about 45 days.
Yeah, tomorrow we're sending out the letters.
Okay, I thought that's what you said. And then the other thing is, I looked on the website before the meeting. Is it possible we could bring the public along now too? I mean, if we're going to be going to the voters in May, it might be good to kind of let them know what we're doing in this process right now. Just a thought. I just thought it might be helpful for them to understand the steps that we take before we make a decision to put it before them in May.
Those are my questions. Right now, we're kind of focusing on the taxing districts. We have a public involvement plan, and there's going to be a rollout of public information, fact sheets, a video that'll be online, and mailer. There'll be a mailer to every registered voter in the city, informing them of the hearing, and it'll be, slickly produced, informative mailer.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I just thought
transitioning to that.
Some people might hear about these presentations going before the taxing districts. And so I just thought that maybe something on the website or something that lets them know where we are in the process right now might be helpful. So thanks. That's it.
Council President Goodhouse.
Yes, I agree with Councilor Newton. If we can maybe at least do social media or something, maybe a explanation of just how urban renewal districts work, it would be good, just because we already have the two existing. So while the conversation's coming up, there's always a little bit of confusion, and that video was really great. That just kind of showed how the one part's frozen and how the other part increases and how it works. So, maybe just a little bit of that getting out there to kind of getting people ready for May. It's never too early to educate. But otherwise, I don't have any questions. If anyone has any wants to know how the TVF&R meeting went, I could give a quick overview of that. But otherwise, I don't have any questions.
Councillor Lube, anything?
My question is actually to ask how those meetings, initial meetings have gone.
Council President Goodhouse, you want to start with TVF&R and then I can cover the school district?
Yes. So a few of the questions that arose were just what projects have been done. There was a question about with Atwell of how much urban renewal money was put into that for the project, and Sean Farley described that the money went to STCs, which were then takes care of transportation and parks and so forth. There was another question about the Heritage Trail and about how much money was put into that. There was about the only concern that was brought up was with the future apartments and growth would be parking, how to address that. Even though we went over parking structure and being built possibly off of Burnham and Hall, it was brought up that could be quite a walking distance, and some concern over the Ava Roastery being built with having 21 parking spaces. So what would be done for future apartments that would address parking, so there would be enough parking to meet those needs, so there wasn't a lack of parking in the area. Those were really the main items. There was, and this may help in future communication, but there was some misunderstanding between the Tiger Triangle Urban Renewal District and the downtown one. They thought that when the downtown Tiger one was extended, they thought that there was some problem with it, and then the Tiger Triangle money was going to go help out the downtown Tigard one. So that might be something going forward, is how to really differentiate those two and understand that those are two separate ones, and how they work. But that was a summary of it. I don't know if I missed anything, Sean, but I think that was the summary of the questions that came up.
Who was confused about that? TVFNR board members or the chief or the
a board member was confused. They thought that that 3 years ago when we put it out for a ballot measure, they thought they saw something in Reddit that the downtown Tigard one, due to the economics and so forth, was trouble, and the Tiger Triangle was created to give some money into the downtown one, and then we basically outlined and said that there's two at the same time, so there might be a confusion with them both being on the ballot. And I think the Main Street one did reference, when we had that out to the voters, that due to the recession and due to the housing market, that we had to extend it to be able to get more effectiveness out of that district.
Mr. Fairley, do you want to add anything more to the TVFNR presentation?
Yeah, they had a lot of questions. Some of them did go kind of a far afield from what we were asking about, and parking and how far people will walk to a parking structure. But there were some good questions, and they're understandably concerned about impacts to their budgets. But they'll be considering it resolution at their next meeting, at their January meeting.
So the meeting with Tigard-Tualatin School District Board of Directors happened during a school board meeting last night, actually. And I think we're scheduled for about 20 minutes, and I think we went almost, with questions, like 35 or 40 minutes. It was pretty significant dialogue and discussion. Mr. Fairley and Ms. Howard gave their presentation, and then I did an intro, they did their presentations, and then we had, I would say, about 15 to 20 minutes worth of questions that were mostly focused on the financial impacts to the school district, the mechanics of exactly how going back to Urban Renewal 101, kind of the detailed mechanics. I mean, I think everyone on the school board has a general understanding or has had a general understanding of urban renewal, but it's confusing enough that everybody always has, I think, some specific questions they want to ask. And so Elaine was very helpful in answering those. There were some questions about projects too, not a lot, but I'd say overall the school board was receptive to what our vision is, but certainly has concerns about the financial impacts in the short run. I tried to remind them that the beauty of this is that it makes things happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise, and that it's a long-term investment or an investment in the long term, and it really has to be viewed that way. So I think the other thing that for them in particular, Elaine was describing the way that the student funding, the per pupil funding happens in the state of Oregon. And I made the point at the end after she shared that if the school district in particular is probably the most immune to direct financial impact of all the taxing jurisdictions, and they were sort of like, well, we got to worry about the impact to the state fund. And I reminded them that urban renewal everywhere in the state that's approved by other people are impacting their own money. And so this is a project and a urban renewal area that's actually in their community. And so I hope, Sean, is that a fair summary of the school district discussion?
I think it is, yeah. A lot of questions about just the mechanics and how the school fund is impacted and how their district will be impacted. I think one item that's going to help conversations with all of the affected taxing districts is the requirement for revenue sharing that would kick in 2036. So that is going to, replenish some of the funds that were foregone during the period that there's division of taxes. And we did spend a good bit of time on that at TVFNR meeting, and I think that's going to help the conversation.
So any other questions from council on those meetings? Or a motion?
I recommend that the TCDA board initiate the public review process for the draft substantial amendment of the City Center Urban Renewal Plan and accompanying report.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, roll call vote, please.
Director Newton,
Yes.
Director Lube,
Yes.
Director Anderson,
Yes.
Chair Snyder,
Yes.
and Director Goodhouse.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, and look forward to this progressing. I think the new council in the new year is going to have a lot of work to do on this. We will reconvene as the City Council for the remaining agenda items. Next item on the agenda is a briefing on traffic concern review processes and potential 20-mile-per-hour speed zones. Engineer Fea and Engineer Enlow.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. This is Tegan Enlow. I am a senior project engineer in our engineering division, and I'm really excited to talk to you tonight about some work that our staff and division have been doing related to how we process concerns that are voiced by members of the public. We've been spending the last several months really reviewing the different ways in which we receive concerns that are expressed to us and the way that we process them and handle them, and working on some internal policies just to make sure that as different concerns are expressed, we're giving consistent answers and documenting well and finding ways to really use our data to drive any sort of decisions that can be made and solutions that we can put out in the field to help the members of our community. And one of those items that I wanted to talk to you more about tonight and hopefully get some feedback and hear your initial thoughts on is a program that we would like to propose. And if you guys receive this idea well tonight and want us to, we can put together something more formal for your consideration in February. But it is related to a 20-mile-per-hour program that we would be interested in implementing in the city with your support. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and begin the presentation that I have put together. Okay, so we have been evaluating how 20-mile-per-hour speed zones could be put within the city of Tigard. And I'm going to talk to you about a couple different things tonight, why it's something that we're looking at, what the supporting ORS is that's allowing us to look at it, where within the city of Tigard would qualify for this treatment, what our recommended implementation plan is, the public engagement that we would be recommending to support it, lessons learned from other jurisdictions that are implementing it currently, conversations we've had with the police department, and then what we would suggest is the next steps. So as I mentioned previously, we've been updating our traffic concern policy. And one of the items related to that is looking at these requests that are coming in with the 20-mile-per-hour and wanting to make sure that we're finding ways to implement requests that we're getting for reduced speed zones. So we want to be able to implement neighborhood traffic calming. We want to be able to implement some of the things that have come out of our Complete Streets program that you've previously seen. And there's recently been an update to the state of Oregon's ORS that allows us to consider offering this as something we can do in our city. It's also something that would be supported by our strategic plan and our Complete Streets policy. And one thing that we have learned from national research is that when you have a lower posted speed, the survivability of pedestrians who are also using that right-of-way significantly increases with the slower that the traffic is going. Okay, So there was recently an update to the ORS. It's ORS 810.180, Section 11. And it basically authorizes a city to adopt an ordinance that would allow them to establish a speed as 5 mph below the statutory speed limit if it meets the following. So it has to be a roadway that currently has a statutory 25. And a statutory 25 is similar to what we think of as like a rural 55, where we don't have a specific speed zone set like 30 or 35 or 40, which is registered through the state. It just kind of defaults based on the area type to that zone. So within the state of Oregon, we have that for 25 mph zones that you see in local areas. We cannot apply it on an arterial street, and an arterial street is a functional classification that's given to major roadways that carry a lot of traffic. So an example of that would be Highway 99. So the intent of this is that it would be to smaller roads that carry less traffic and are, more residential in nature. And it has to be in an area defined as a residential district. So with our partners in GIS and with the help of Oscar in our engineering division, we did a query of the streets within the city of Tigard to see which ones would qualify as meeting that criteria to be eligible for a 20 mph zone. So anything on this map that's highlighted in a color indicates that it is one that would be in accordance with the ORS, something that could be set to 20 mph. And what I wanted to show you with this map are two things. The first is that it covers a very significant portion of the city of Tigard. It's a lot. The second is that we overlaid an equity layer. So we've used some data that has come out of a census update that looks at different parameters that tell us information about the population that lives in it. So it looks at things like car dependency, income, density of children and older generation, and it assigns an equity score to it. So anything that's in the blue and the green has a lower equity score, so less need, and anything that starts moving from yellow, orange, red is a higher score, so it's got more need. And that's something that we wanted to be paying attention to as we were looking at implementing these, because one of the categories that's used in that is access to a vehicle. And so the areas that have a higher equity need score would indicate more dependency on being able to use the transportation system as pedestrians and cyclists and less access to vehicles. So we are recommending that, and not officially today, this is more of an opportunity to hear from you, what your thoughts are on it. But what our recommendation would be is that if you're supportive of this concept, we would bring an ordinance to you for consideration in February that would essentially allow us to place the 20 mph speed zone on any eligible streets within the city of Tigard. But the ordinance is written in such a way that it doesn't become effective until we actually go out and put signs up that say 20. So it's not like by signing an ordinance, it would automatically be 20 at that point. It would become effective once we put the signs up. And we recognize that that first map that I showed you has a pretty substantial overlay across the city. And in order to basically cover that much territory, that much ground, it would take us a lot of significant staff time, a lot of capital funds, and several years to put together. So we're recommending at this point a targeted implementation plan that would look at key locations as part of a first phase rollout while we work on scoping further priorities for the city and kind of figure out what longer term that might look like. So what we're recommending for this first phase and where we would start first is basically building off of a data-driven approach and something that allows us to respond to community feedback. So there are 4 areas that we would recommend for the first wave of implementation, and it is something that we ran through our TTAC as well and got their verbal support on and feedback on. We would be looking at doing existing 20 mph school zones. The idea with that being that there's lots of children present in those areas. They're already 20 during certain times of the day. And so what we would be doing with this is where those overlay with eligible streets, we would be looking to make it 20 permanently. The second would be what we're calling safe routes to school, walk, and roll routes. There are certain corridors or roadway sections within the city that we know carry a lot of pedestrian and bicycle traffic when people are able to attend school in person. And so we would be looking to make those 20 miles per hour to really make sure that we have a supportive environment for people who are using those alternate modes. And then trail connections. So this would be areas where we have connections to the Fano Creek Trail system where people either are accessing the trail or are entering the roadway network to go from one trailhead to the next, because we do have some sections where people use the roadway system. And then areas where we have documented behavioral issues or complex features. So these are the areas where we've heard from the public on, and after some engineering review and studies and data review, we think that they would really benefit from being 20 miles per hour permanently. So the second map that I'm showing you has a couple different things going on. The lines that are colored on here represent the different spots that we would be recommending for implementation for the first phase of rollout. So the brown ones are access to trails. The kind of purpley color are those safe routes to school, walking routes and biking routes. The green are the existing 20 mile per hour school zones that would qualify. And then the red are two streets that we're recommending based on what we've observed out in the field. One of those is Ascension, which I know that you guys have previously heard about. And then the other is 100th, where we have had some concerns with the back-to-back curves there and a lot of walking requests or requests for better infrastructure for people to be able to walk. And then the shaded area behind them is, again, those equity layers that we talked about. They don't perfectly match to the colors in the legend because they're kind of grayed out so you can see the lines. But again, blue and green are lower needs, and then areas that are the yellows and browns and reds start to move up to having a higher equity need. So we are looking at a couple different options for community engagement. Our first wave that we would be doing is that following any feedback that's received tonight and assuming that we get some support and that you guys are comfortable with the concept, we would be doing a citywide community engagement website and survey. And the goal of that would really be to inform the public, let them know that what we're looking at, seek some initial feedback on our phase 1 rollout and kind of the areas that we're targeting and see what they're thinking. And then should we move forward with an ordinance that is then successfully passed and we look to roll out at these phase 1 locations, we would do some additional outreach to let people know we're moving forward with the program, and then also some outreach that's targeted to the areas that are going to see the 20 mile per hour implementation. We would be doing postcards in the neighborhoods surrounding where those are going, offering 20 is plenty signs, and some advanced signs that we would set up that indicate that a project's coming to install 20 mile per hour signs. And what I did want to mention with that is that that is something we'd be offering with kind of this first phase where there's really specific locations. If later we started to roll out to a larger portion of the city, then we may not be able to do quite as much like advanced signage or postcards at that point because we'd be doing a larger area. So as part of preparing for this, we spoke with other agencies that are currently rolling this out. I spoke with the City of Eugene, which is in the process of rolling out their 20 mile per hour program. And there were a couple of things that they brought up that they thought was kind of their lessons learned. The first was that when they first rolled out the program, there was some support related to lowering the speed limits for benefits for pedestrians and cyclists. And I think really the messaging there is that if you're in a vehicle, the 5 miles per hour may not feel substantial other than you're not really sure why you're being reduced by 5. But if you are a cyclist or a pedestrian, the difference in a car going by you at 25 versus 20 actually is a very substantial impact to your level of comfort for using the facility. So one of the things we want to focus on is really that there is a large impact for them, and that the drive time impact is very is a small increase in your drive time. So I have two examples. We looked at 79th Avenue because that's one of the locations we're proposing for our phase 1 rollout. So between Bonita and Durham, if we were to change that from 25 miles per hour to 20, it would add 20 seconds of drive time to go from one end to the other. For an average city block of 500 feet, it would add about 3.5 seconds of drive time. So it is a very small amount of drive time that's added for a very large benefit to the other modes. But the cities that have implemented this, or at least Eugene specifically, said that they did have some feedback after implementation began of people questioning why such a large effort was being made for such a nominal reduction in speed. And so I think really focusing on the messaging up front would be beneficial for us to consider. And then there were some additional costs that the city of Eugene incurred once they started. It's not quite as simple as just finding where all the existing 25-mile-per-hour signs are and swapping them out to say 20. There will be instances where we have to do new sign installation. So as an example, we have a lot of areas up on Bull Mountain where we go in and out of City of Tigard and then to Washington County jurisdiction. And Washington County would not have the 20-mile-per-hour zone in effect. And so in instances where we didn't need to sign, you know, that you were 25 on our boundary and 25 on theirs when you entered it, now there'd be a speed zone adjustment because you'd be 20 on the Tigard Street, and then once you hit the jurisdictional line and moved to Washington County, it would go back up to 25. So we'd have to install some additional signs in instances like that. We have done outreach to our police department because we know that this impacts more than just public works operations and engineering. They have indicated that they support safer streets in Tigard, including reduced speed limits where applicable, and that they would really be focusing on taking an education with warnings and then enforcement with tickets approach to the speeding issues. At this time, their staffing is not sufficient to be able to support targeted enforcement for multiple locations if the change is enacted in, you know, a bunch of spots across the city. But they will do what they have been for the current scenario, which is respond to specific complaints that are supported by data. So we would be, as part of the rollout, well, actually, I'll get to that in just a second. So the next steps would be, if you guys are, or if council is in support of this, we would start work on preparing an ordinance for your consideration in February. We would roll out the public engagement website in the next week or so to begin getting feedback. And then if the ordinance is passed, we would begin implementation, and we would be working on doing some before and after studies. We've been really fortunate in that we've had a volunteer for a little over 16 years named Tom Pedersen in our engineering group. And for the last 16 years, he's been volunteering his time to collect traffic volumes and speed counts annually to help Tigard manage its transportation system. So we have a really great archive of data available to us on historically how many people have been driving on roadways and how fast they've been going. So what we would do is use that information, and then if we're installing in a location where we don't have that, we'd go out and collect another count so that we really understand what those patterns were before. And then we would install the 20 and go back out and do another count to really see what the impact has been and how people are responding, and then use that information to kind of figure out what our next steps are from an education standpoint, and also to coordinate with police as well. So that concludes all the information that I have at this point right now, but I would be more than happy to answer any sort of questions that you may have. I understand that I just put out quite a bit of data and different things, so if there's anything I can clarify or respond to, please let me know. And with that, I will turn it back over to you all.
Thank you, Tegan. That's very informative and really helpful. I have some comments, but I will save them and let others speak first. Youth Councillor Calderon, any comments or questions?
No questions, but I would like to say 20 miles per hour seems like a perfect amount for me. I feel that 25 is quite fast in neighborhoods, and I do get people tailgating me when I'm going like 23, and that is a little stressful. So I would appreciate this change to 20 miles per hour.
All right, Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, great information, Ms. Enlow. In looking at most of the categories, I'll call them, they're pretty self-explanatory. The one I'm wondering about is documented driver behavior concerns. As we roll out this program, I think I'm going to say a definition and a process for how those get identified is going to be important, because I think you may get contacted by folks in neighborhoods thinking, okay, well, I think I want 20, and it may be appropriate, but I think we need to have some clarity around that. And I don't know if you're planning to have that as part of the presentation in February or how that's going to work out, but I think that will be important. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a really great point. One of the things that we've been working on as we've been figuring out how to streamline and create consistency with how we process concerns that are voiced to us is how we define basically speeding, because we have, there's lots of different ways you could do it, right? There's the way that someone who lives in the environment might experience it. There's the way that, our engineering textbooks might tell us what it looks like. And so we've been having internal discussions with community development, operations, engineering, and police to really talk about, okay, how do we process those concerns when they come in? What kind of data do we evaluate? At what point do we say this warrants further evaluation? And it's something we're still finalizing right now, but I think you've definitely, hit the nail on the head, which is that having those internal policies will be really important to be able to point to and explain to people how we're determining what areas qualify for this kind of treatment.
Thank you. That's all I had. Thanks.
Council President Goodhouse. Comments or questions?
No, I'm in support of it. I think it's a great day. I wonder, for the example, that when we have a longer stretch where, as you mentioned, if it's a longer stretch, it could take 23 seconds, I believe it was, to get there. So that might be part of an education portion, or see how we can implement that in areas where that stretch. I think the area you're talking about, I'm trying to think if that's the same spot, but I know that there's a problem with speeding there, and they try to get people to slow down. So I just wonder if already at 25, if people maybe feel impatient, how in the longer stretches the 20 mile an hour might work, or what we can do to educate people. But yeah, I agree with there's a lot of areas where we need to have it slow down, and I think that's one of the biggest complaints we get from neighborhoods is people speeding through them.
Councillor Anderson.
No questions. It's got interesting potential. You just have to go through the process. Thank you.
Councillor Lube.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm in support of it. I think, as a cyclist, I have a unique perspective of how scary it is when cars are flying by you, and the 20 miles an hour, definitely creates that extra safety and time for drivers to see you and just to be aware. And the education piece is going to be really important, that, it takes X amount of time, but it's safer for all road users. And I think it just makes it a safer place for people to get around in general. And so great support of that. And I also want to thank you for highlighting Tom Pedersen. That's pretty incredible for the last 16 years that he's been gathering traffic data. And I hope that we can thank him, or maybe as a city council acknowledge him, because that's just incredible to do for your city, to volunteer to take the traffic stuff. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Councillor Lube, I think that's an excellent recommendation. And City Manager Nyland, why don't you and I take that as a item we need to brainstorm and figure out how to recognize him for all the work he does for the city. I have a couple thoughts. One, I think somebody just mentioned, but I'll reemphasize, when campaigning a couple years ago, knocking on thousands of doors, this is definitely in the top 3 issues that's brought up. In fact, it's probably, at the time, it was probably issue number 2 was neighborhood speeds. And I actually had this on my work, sort of my own personal work plan coming out of being elected mayor, as something that I wanted to advocate for. And I think we put it in our council goals. And we advocated at the state to get the pilot that Portland had been doing to be allowed to be implemented other places or something similar, and that's been successful. And so I think moving forward with, you know, selectively working the 20-mile-per-hour residential zone in where appropriate makes a whole lot of sense. So thank you to the council for supporting that and for helping to push. And I'm confident that we'll figure it out over the next couple of years. I think Engineer Enlow made this point, but I will remind everybody, as a healthcare person and a paramedic, the survivability. If you ever wonder why school zones are at 20 miles per hour, it really does just come down to the survivability of crashes. And the difference in those 5 miles an hour is like a 50% difference in survival. It's dramatic. And so I will just point that out. The last thing that I want to mention is about the traffic enforcement and Tigard Police Department part of this. And this will be directed to the whole staff team that might be involved in this, and not just to Engineer Enlow. But you know, when I look at something like this, that's going to be a multi-year implementation and planning effort and phased over time. What I don't understand about the statements that were made from the police department perspective is that if we desire to have a more active enforcement program, that's a budget neutral conversation, because traffic officers generally generate more revenue than they cost. And so when I see that in a multi-year project or timeline, I don't really understand the reasoning why we wouldn't take, if it's budget neutral or budget positive, why we wouldn't be being proactive about that now, so that this is all in a coordinated fashion. So Interim City Manager Nyland, Chief McAlpine, and Assistant City Manager McAlpine, or Acting Assistant City Manager, I would suggest that that comment be taken and considered when we have such long lead time on this. I don't know if other councilors have any comments about that, but it seems to me like that shouldn't be a barrier. Anyone have thoughts? Or people comfortable with that?
It sounds, I'd like to hear from the chief if that's possible.
Chief McAlpine, are you able to comment?
Sure, and thank you for that opportunity. And Tegan did not write anything that we did not approve, so I definitely want to make sure that you understand those concerns did come from the police department and not from Tegan herself. It was just a matter of really, in the beginning, managing expectations. And so it's taking this snapshot in time as we're staffed with 2 motors and still onboarding all of our levy officers and getting them trained. So all we offered up was, of course, we're in it. We've been communicating from the get-go, and we just want to, you know, if everybody's expecting us to be, let's say you roll out 30 streets the first time, just managing those expectations appropriately. But we're definitely in it and collaborating, and if it's the council's direction that be an emphasis, we'll make sure the visibility and the signage is there to help us send that message. And we're going to rely a lot on the public outreach and the education ahead of time.
And Tegan, how far out is the beginning of this? Because it seems like we could plan and phase that so that we have the sort of warning, education, and enforcement mechanisms in place when we're at, you know, aren't we at least between 12 and 24 months out on most of this?
We could absolutely be 12 or 24 months out if you want. I think that our intent had been, if if we present an ordinance and it is approved, that we would slowly roll out locations. So we wouldn't try and do them all over like 1 week or something, because it would be something we're absorbing into our current workload. We would probably plan to do maybe 1 or 2 a month and kind of, just keep going until we had gone through all the phase 1 locations. We haven't put together a real specific work plan about when that would start, because we wanted to get some initial feedback from you all. We could also, have it start at a later date if we wanted to coordinate with the police department on some efforts that they're doing and what their schedules allow and other things that they're working on. So I think it's really flexible. The ordinance itself just says that it's something we can do, and it authorizes the city and the engineering department to put out a sign that then makes a roadway 20. But it doesn't mean that once it passes, there's a time clock on how soon they have to go in or what the duration is of when they all have to be done. It just gives us the ability to do it from that point forward, which is really nice and flexible.
I would not suggest we slow anything down. I would, however, suggest that the police department have its own sort of on the project plan. There should probably be a parallel project plan for the police department on the same project, and be ready for what they need to be ready for over the next couple years, and looking forward to what the actual need might be. And I'm going to assume that probably means more traffic enforcement, and we should plan for that now. And it's a good problem that it doesn't have a net negative budget impact to do so.
I think we could definitely, between our 2 departments, coordinate before we come back in February and provide some updated recommendations on what the parallel tracks could look like between engineering and police. No, I'm not trying to speak for the chief, but I think that we could definitely talk with each other and then have some thoughts that we could share with you next time.
Thank you. Chief, are you amenable to that?
Yes, sir, I am. And I know that Sergeant Erickson has been listening in, ready to assist or answer questions. And he's hearing that directly, the edict as well. So we will plan accordingly. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very much. And we look forward to you bringing that work back. I'm excited, very excited for our community.
Great. Thank you. We look forward to it too.
All right, we are 15 minutes over time. We have 3 discussions to have on non-agenda items, and we have a 90-minute executive session scheduled after this. So just to bring everyone to reality on timing here, Councillor Lube, I'm wondering if you would be okay with me summarizing where I think we should head with your suggestion, or would you like to do that just in the to try to observe timeliness? It seems pretty clear to me that we've been supporting the eviction moratorium all along, and we should certainly be advocating for the extension of it. Do you want to say more, or are you comfortable if we get the council's agreement to send a letter to that effect to all of the representatives and legislative members in our area?
Yeah, I would just say that I think it's really important that we send it. I've read some hesitation from our senator, and I think we should, encourage all of our representatives to come to a solution, and so our residents are taken care of who are in difficult spots. So that's just why I wanted to bring it forward.
So council, I don't feel like we need to redebate whether the eviction moratorium should be in place or not, because we've already had that discussion, and unless someone's changed their mind, this seems like a pretty clear thing to me. But does anyone object to that? Everybody's supportive of it? Okay.
I don't object. The only thing I was going to mention, if we could add in there, would be just for resources for those either, if we're doing commercial and residential, just to keep pushing for those resources at the federal level or state level for those that do hold those notes on the commercial buildings or on the residential.
Councillor Lube, are you suggesting, was this for sort of the both commercial and residential eviction moratorium request?
Yes.
Okay. And then Council President Goodhouse, you're suggesting that we make sure we're covering, whatever financial support or relief can be given to help make all that happen? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes. Yeah. The biggest thing I've heard is that no one disagrees with the eviction moratorium. It's just those property owners or those landlords for those commercial buildings, they have their bank notes to pay as well. So when something puts in place like that, then they're kind of left high and dry. So if there's an additional add-on that we can look for resources for them, that way it helps everyone around.
That's true of residential landlords too. Councilor Lube, are you okay with that being in the letter?
Yes.
Interim City Manager Nyland, who is going to take point on making this letter happen? City Attorney or somebody else?
I will work with the City Attorney to draft a letter.
Okay.
And read it by you.
Thank you. Council President Goodhouse, we received a communication from Planet Fitness today. Do you want to cover that real quickly with what I would suggest you start with whatever your recommendation is and then describe why?
My recommendation is for support, for the council to support fitness organizations. I guess that would also include going back to the bowling alley and ice rink conversation, but for fitness is to be able to have be open in some capacity in the high risk zone of the new model that's being put out. In the high risk and so forth, they're okay, but the higher risk, they're not allowed to be open. And all the data, and I won't summarize or go through detail, but what was sent to the council earlier from a University of Oregon study was showing that those that work out are not getting or transmitting COVID in those locations. The benefit of being able to work out it is a huge factor during these times, especially when it's shorter days, so forth, but also the impact of how many, I think there's 466 gyms in Oregon, and that's just the major ones. When you start looking at smaller gyms and everything like that, you're looking at thousands. How many people are going unemployed, these businesses that have to still pay their rent, utilities, everything like that, with being completely shut down compared to where hospitality, the restaurants can at least be open to some level. And to recap or close it up, I think it was last week on the League of Oregon Cities call, I'd asked the Leah Horner from the governor's office, and they even stated that they had seen no cases come from gyms. So it's something that while hospitality can be open and restaurants, then the gym should be as well.
Did Leah indicate why they have this included if they don't have any evidence to support it?
They said what they thought is that asymptomatic people were either present or part of it. So they said they had nothing sure, but they said they weren't moving on it, and the only thing they could come up with what they thought maybe it would be a problem would be asymptomatic, but there's no proof or evidence that that's even being done through the contact tracing or anything like that.
All right, so council, this is I know we've had similar discussions. I put this in the category of sort of sending a communication or the suggestion that we send a communication that's inconsistent with what the Oregon Health Authority and the governor's public health directions have been. How much support? Maybe I can get some initial thumbs ups or downs. Councilor Lube, I guess I don't know if your camera's on and I just can't see you or not, but what are the thoughts on this with thumbs? Who's supportive of sending some sort of communication about Planet Fitness or other gym facilities and perhaps other recreational sites and sort of citing some different evidence here? Anyone supportive of that?
Mr. Mayor, really quick, Councilor Newton, I guess I've been on the calls with the League of Oregon Cities too, and my concern is that we don't have clarity on why there is the restriction. So I do have that question of the state. I think if we're going to have that restriction and they can't explain why, that's a little bit, I don't know, that's confusing to me, because for the most part, they're able to talk about their concerns. And if they view them similarly to other types of businesses and they're not saying, that concerns me. So that's my question is, why aren't, what's the science, I guess I'll say, behind keeping them closed if they're saying there's science that provides evidence to the contrary?
So maybe our message should be, show us the science, or we recommend that you, if you can't prove it or you don't have evidence to support it, then you probably shouldn't be doing it, or you shouldn't be banning it.
Yeah, or you ought to, open it up to a percentage, or what, I mean, if we want to try to support businesses and they could operate at 25% or 50%, I just am confused too, because listening to those LOC calls, they haven't been able to articulate the reason behind that. And I don't think it's unreasonable to ask.
Okay, so you'd be supportive of a letter that did that?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Anderson, would you be supportive of that?
Yes, I would. It looked like in our packet that Planet Fitness had sent a letter to the governor's office already on their behalf. So maybe ours could be a little bit broader, not just specifically for Planet Fitness, but.
Oh yeah, no, it'll be broader.
Gotcha.
At least that's what I'm envisioning. Youth Councilor Calderon, what do you think?
I mean, if there's no science to say why they should be closed, and if people are hurting who own those businesses, we should for sure open them. And I know that there's a lot of people who would appreciate having physical activity being open. So yeah, having that letter sent about asking where's the science and why are you guys having this blocked, and if not, recommending them to open them, that would be a great idea.
Councillor Lube, can you support that approach?
Yep, I can support the letter asking the questions.
Okay. All right. Interim City Manager Nyland, who's going to take point on that one?
I will once again work with City Attorney and Joanne, and we will draft a communication asking questions to understand the reasoning behind such restrictions.
And a statement that if there isn't reasoning, that it should be changed. That's the second part. Okay. Council President Goodhouse, you also had a question about the Tigard Cares program. Has there, just to begin with, I think this question was coming up from a business that started between December 2019 and when COVID happened. So I think the question is, could businesses that started after December 2019 but before COVID started be eligible for the Tigard Cares program? Did staff ever, is there any information that you received from staff about why, if that's true, and why?
So it kind of came up to my attention at the last moment. So knowing that this was our last council meeting, I wanted to at least stress it. It sounded like it could be around federal funding, or it sounded like possibly they still could apply. My concern is I would hate to see that we issue funding and find out that businesses, that if they saw that part on the questionnaire, that they didn't have any, if they opened in the beginning of the year, that they just either didn't fill it out or didn't apply for it. And there might be some of those struggling businesses that started from December on. I'd hate to see that we go back and realize that they didn't get funding or weren't able to. And so got a bit of an answer that from Lloyd Purdy that said it could be having to do with the federal funding or part of it, but didn't get what I thought was a clear answer. And so I just want to at least bring it up so we're, before we start giving out funds, that we don't miss any of these businesses that maybe got halfway through it and decided not to complete it.
Okay, so you don't feel like I see Mr. Asher's offering to speak, and so is Interim City Manager Nyland. Interim City Manager Nyland, you want to defer to Mr. Asher, or do you want to speak first?
Yes, I will defer to Director Asher.
Thank you, Ms. Nyland. I can be brief. Having spoken with Lloyd, we did see your question, Council President Goodhouse, and the very short answer is that we in Tigard Cares don't have an eligibility requirement about when you started your business. In other words, anybody is eligible to apply no matter when their business began. So that's part A of the answer. Part B is a little more complicated. These are federal funds, and to be grant eligible, you have to be able to demonstrate a COVID-related expense or harm to your business. And the way that we establish that is by comparing your profit and loss or your income from a month in 2019 as compared to 2020. So any business that wasn't operating during 2019 is going to have a hard time answering that question. It doesn't mean that they can't apply, and it doesn't mean that we might not be able to find some other way to help them demonstrate a COVID-related loss. But that's the sticking point, and that's not endemic to our local regulations. That is a federal regulation that's carrying through to the state, to the county, and to us.
Certainly being closed entirely would be, I would think, prima facie evidence that you had harm, right? I mean, when you can't bring a single dollar through the door?
One idea is just to be able to point to closures stemming from the governor's orders. That might qualify. So I guess to cut to the quick, Planet Fitness or any of these other businesses ought to apply through Tigard Cares. They ought not feel disqualified. They're not disqualified, but there is going to be some amount of demonstration that's going to happen that proves they've got a COVID-related expense or harm as compared to where they were before this pandemic began.
Is there since the application process closes tonight, do we see anything where if someone started an application halfway through and stopped, do we see any businesses that may have started an application and stopped, that we could reach out and see why they didn't complete it and see if maybe they saw that requirement and didn't proceed forward?
I don't know the answer, but I can find out. And if we find that that's happening, we can reach out to those businesses.
Okay, that was my only concern with it closing tonight. And if some businesses saw that and thought, oh, I don't qualify, I would hate to see those businesses in need out there, especially maybe a business that maybe just started up and then put all that outlay, they really need it. So
okay, shall do.
Thank you, Kenny.
Thank you.
Interim City Manager Nyland, do you have an administrative report, or if maybe just hit the highlights, given that we're way over time?
I do have an administrative report, and they're all highlights, but I will narrow those down. So just wanted to confirm that Public Works sent over the water system master plan to Oregon Health Authority. So we followed up on that. I also wanted to let you know that we obtained the needed contract signatures that we discussed last week, and the Tigard Cares Round 5 was launched on Thursday. And we are already seeing a lot of activity. I think 40% of the available funds remain. I wanted to give an update with library. I've talked about their takeout service that they're offering. So in 23 service days, over 3,600 patrons took advantage of that service. So we are indeed being creative in how we are providing our resources in this pandemic era. As you know, we are all very busy, court especially. Last council meeting, you appointed Judge O'Brien as pro tem. So we've received 29 applications for the municipal judge position, and we are hoping to invite 6 to 8 of the candidates to interview in early January. And just a data point to show how busy court has been. Between July 1st and November 30th of 2019, 1,852 violations were filed with court. Between July 1st and November 30th of 2020, over 12,000 violations have been filed with court. So we've seen almost a 600% increase in activity. So kudos to that team for continuing to operate smoothly and seamlessly, and they're tired. And we recognize that. So just wanted to give an update on the Tigard Thanks promotion that we launched a few weeks back. We got the kindest email from a community member that she said, despite the pandemic, I feel closer to this community than I've ever have before because of Tigard city government and the communications. She knows what's going on between fireside chats, the newsletter, Facebook page. She's always learning about ways to connect with the community. So she wanted to thank you and our staff on doing a really great job. City staff have also sponsored 11 families from the Tigard Elementary. We've provided $50 in meals from the Portland Catering Company and $25 gift cards for each child involved in that program. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for initiating the Public Safety Advisory Board. And I want to thank everyone who applied for that opportunity and the community who really took time selecting representatives. We had our first meeting last night, and it was really inspiring, that group of members who served on that board. They were intentional and thoughtful and are really putting people at the center of any decisions that they make. So kudos to everyone involved in that process. And an interesting fact to note, 7 of the 9 community members chosen had never served on a board at the City of Tigard before. So we have new voices who are part of the conversation. And last but not least, we started the meeting honoring Councilman Anderson. I wanted to also express my, I wanted to end the meeting and express my gratitude. It has been a pleasure getting to know you and working with you, and I always appreciate your voice and vision, and you will be missed. So thank you for your service to the city and making us a better place. That's what I have.
All right. Thank you. Tigard City Council will now go into executive session to discuss employment of a public officer under ORS 192.660 subsection 2A. All discussions are confidential and those present may disclose nothing from the session. Representatives of the news media can attend the executive sessions as provided by ORS 192.660 subsection 4, but must not disclose any information discussed. No executive session may be held for the purpose of taking any final action or making any final decision. Executive sessions are closed to the public. The City Council will adjourn directly from the executive session. And we will recess and start an executive session in a few moments. And Youth Councilor Calderon, you are participating, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Good night, Tigard.